Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about natural talent, natural ability, natural aptitude in anybody, in any field of endeavor. It could be work or music or dancing or whatever, but natural talent, natural aptitude, and relate that back to a vibrant economy, but also on what skills, if any, are needed by importing people. That is the mass migrations going on from to bring as many black and brown illiterate peasants into the West as possible, and to declare this a necessary thing on the basis of skills that are needed. I mean, the chutzpah of someone who would say that. I mean, for goodness sakes. So I just want to look at that as a total, as a total story or a wider narrative, if you will, and also looking at why in the West has training and developing people sort of dropped off a cliff. If I look at government departments now, and even a lot of the corporates, the staff are running off to have hate all white males or sensitivity to transgender bathroom training, but no one's bothering or coming anywhere near the idea of raising their skills to add value in the workplace. Instead, they're all running around with this hysterical nonsense about creating race and social division and sexuality division and creating as much social mayhem as they possibly can. It's being funded by governments and by large corporates, many of whom can write it off as a tax deduction for training. NGOs naturally are doing that sort of thing as part of their core mission statement. But just having a look now, the West went through an astonishing period of wealth creation, sort of late 1940s through to sort of early 1970s. I doubt there's ever been such a time in human history when so much new wealth has been created in such a short time. It's quite astonishing. There are a number of factors that went into that, advanced technology, rebuilding after the war, and that sort of thing. But there was one thing that was very important, that it happened really twice in the same within a 35, 40-year period, and that was the mass mobilization of the two world wars. Now, the world wars were, or these world wars that were interesting in terms of it was the first time there'd been mass mobilization anywhere near that extent. Not only a mass mobilization of people, but of resources. Now, suddenly the nations going to war needed a lot of skills and abilities, and they needed it suddenly and quickly. They had no time to build up. So they may have a normal standing army of 200,000 or 300,000 soldiers, but suddenly they needed 5 million soldiers. And so the people who were, say, privates in the army were suddenly becoming sergeants because they were the closest thing they could get to a soldier who knew what they were doing, who could in turn train others and these sorts of things. So, but most importantly, because they had to find people with ability very quickly, they had to look to people who had natural ability, natural aptitude, people who were an unusually quick study. And they could say, well, and because they couldn't afford mistakes, they had to say, okay, well, it's more likely that this guy is going to learn to learn this job well and quickly, more so than these other people here. And so natural aptitude and talent and eagerness to learn, again, being a quick study, those people naturally percolated to the top. Now, it doesn't mean everyone worked out. Some maybe had a few things but lacked the temperament, or others lost their nerve at the chemo. There's a whole variety of other things went into it. But when you need skills and abilities quickly because you need to get the job done, you can't delay getting the job done. You can't just say, I'll hire my best buddy down the road. He's a fucking idiot, but he'll do it. No. Or I'll get my nephew, my stupid moron, wasteful nephew to do it. No, you can't do that either. So you've got to get people who can do the job. or do the best you can with what you have, and that's maybe another way of looking at it as well. So this idea that HR departments sit back, well, unless I get someone who's got 25 years experience shooting rifles, because you're in wartime, of course, shooting unless I get that, I'm just not going to hire anybody, and the war can stop, and everyone will stop and wait for. No. That's not how it works. But it wasn't just military personnel; it was skills in all area and abilities in all areas, such as supply and logistics and distribution of war material, manufacturing and production, and so on. So many people who weren't, in a strict sense, qualified to do the jobs were being put in jobs because the demand was so great and the need was immediate. So they're being put in these jobs. But it actually worked quite well because they had to throw out the rule books and throw out the what would have been normal processes and procedures. Did you come from the right family? Does your father belong in the right clubs, or these sorts of things? All that had to go out the window. There's not all gone. We just have to focus on, can people do the job or not, and who's the best, and out of the people available. And so this completely changed the dynamic of how skills are selected and how they're applied and used to maximum beneficial effect. And this was where it was going. So this happened in World War One. And in the European societies, they were fairly class-ridden in those days. Class was still a big issue then, less so in the Second World War, but still an issue. Certainly in the military, say you get up to the rank of major, from lieutenant colonel and above, it did get quite political even then. But up to the rank of major, certainly. You even see some of that today, by the way. But up to the rank of major, it was really the best available of what you had, and you just had to run with it and do the best you could. And everyone was in the same boat, by the way. The Germans, for example, probably had a better educated, qualified workforce and military overall. But that aside, there was again the need to mobilise masses of people very quickly. Now, in the Second World War, even more so because it was a far more technological war. So the First World War was still a lot of bayonet charges and that sort of stuff, and really the technology, say in field artillery, was there, but the idea of tanks and aircraft sort of started to come in later on, but didn't play a decisive role until really the closing stages of the war, which was economically grinding to an end anyway. But in the Second World War, technology was a much bigger issue in weaponry at all sorts of levels, certainly aircraft and tanks and all sorts of other things were coming in. So it was much more technological, and this reflected in manufacturing processes, the skills of the people on the ground. Again, logistics and supply were key issues. So the picking of the best people. Now that attitude of natural aptitude, natural ability, picking out the quick study and going, okay, that guy there, he's a quick study. Let's put him in here to get that done. That sort of attitude was still around when I first entered the workforce. So, and that attitude was probably around until the late 1980s, mid to late 1980s, that probably came in. That probably was running until that time. But then it started to change and changed quite quickly. Then the idea of, well, natural aptitude, natural ability, if someone can work harder, someone's fitter, they can work longer hours, they're just that sharper, they're just a little bit sharper upstairs, and they can have a look at what's going on, and they can quickly jump in and do useful, productive work, and then help others and that sort of thing. So the person's going to get the most done, be most effective in the shortest possible time without lengthy formal training. Now, there are still things you want formal training on. You don't want someone having a look at a couple of heart transplant operations going, yeah, I'll give that a go. You can't have that. That obviously still needs very formalized, systemized, and intensive training and traineeship on watching someone actually do it many times. Still needs that, but for many things, not all, but for many things, that natural aptitude was a big was a big issue. In fact, I remember in my first job, I was there was a sort of logistics and inventory control and what would have been supply chain back in the day, and and I grasped that pretty quickly at this place where I was just sort of part time and going to college and everything. And they, the two guys who were sort of in charge of explaining how it all worked, I remember they looked at each other, looked back at me, and said, do you want a full time job? And I ended up sort of heading up that department at a quite a young age, because I was the first guy to get it and be quick enough and sharp enough to understand that particular thing at least. I may have been stupid and everything else, but I got that. And so I ended up getting for my age anyway, quite a well-paid full-time job. So I switched to college part-time. But that was sort of thing was still around. And even at school, I remember at school as a kid, teachers were always looking out for natural aptitude. What was your natural skill? Did you have one, I suppose, firstly, and then what was it? And we were a little bit sharper on some things. Say some kids were quick at getting arithmetic and mathematics and so on. So they would get them, well, why don't you spend an extra few hours a week doing that? And they'd move them around into different lessons and grouping of school lessons in order to encourage and support and facilitate that sort of thing. And I remember a girl at school was a really good drawer. She could draw things and she could just conceive it in her mind. There's a few lines on a page and then it's whatever. And wow, I can't do that. And there's just a few squiggly lines with nothing, and then suddenly it was a dog or a horse or something. Yeah. So people had different aptitudes and skills, but that seemed to fall away. So that we don't want to have people with natural abilities and skills, and people who are sharper than other people, because that creates a meritocracy, and a meritocracy creates unequal outcomes. And we want to change that. So we want to have a regimented certification process, and so everyone has the same certificate, and whether it's a degree or a diploma from a college or something, community college, whatever, everyone's has a the certificate, and that becomes the qualification, that becomes the standard. Then everyone's the same. Everyone's the same. No one's different anymore. Everyone's the same. Everyone's got that same certificate, and each certificate has equal value. Now, we know that's not the case, because we know that minorities are gifted these certificates, and when they couldn't even make it out of junior high school, and they're being put through college and university and being gifted these things, and often quite cruelly, by the way. These people who'll never do more than push a broom or whatever are being, they've got these huge student debts that they may never pay off in their lifetimes. And I think it's cruel to toy with people and give them this mirage that they've got this bright, wonderful future awaiting them when they've got an IQ of 80. But I don't know, some of the people that I'm seeing in the big corporations, and certainly the government departments these days, I don't think our IQ is much above 80. And some of those, equity and diversity coordinator, they pay quite well. There's not many of them around, however, but still, some of the people who get slotted into them, it's definitely not competence or brains that's getting them there. So this was quite a major change in how workers and society and the members of it would be valued within the society. Natural ability, natural aptitude, and natural aptitude could be you're a bright kid at university and you come first in chemistry or something. Aptitude could be looked at in different ways. More practical aptitude was where I was looking. If someone showed a great practical on the ground ability to do something well, or certainly better than anyone else around, then why not give them a go? Why not encourage them? Why not support them? They're going to do a much better job, produce more wealth for all of us. We'll all do better out of that. That person does well, then the business makes more money and they offer more jobs to more people and things like that. So there's a lot of benefit in going down that path, but we lost that. As I say, it was around the late 80s when people started, and I saw this around where I was. Well, why? Women make up 51% of the population. Women should have 51% of all managerial jobs. Women do not have 51% of all managerial jobs. Must be something wrong. Must be something wrong. It's racism. It's Hitler. It's fascism. So problems were invented by using that equity, equal outcomes rationale to say, well, there must be a problem. It must be racism. It must be misogyny. It must be this or that. So they started appointing people on the basis of, well, shouldn't we do it? We don't have any women of colour in the management team. Why not? What's wrong? Do you all hate black women? Are you a racist, Billy Bob? Is that what you're saying? What you got books about Hitler at home? Have you? Are you not a secret fascist? Is that a KKK badge? And so people were already getting shamed and blamed back in the day. This is again late 80s, early 90s. In businesses I was in as VP, I wouldn't tolerate any of that nonsense. But it was certainly things that I could see around. And while these people were saying, well, let's why don't we have a black woman in there? And they were paying them shit money. So it wasn't always equity. It was creating jobs where skills weren't needed or presumed they weren't needed, and then paying people crap money just as some perverse virtue signal. Again, this was going on for quite a while. So when we look at this idea of creating wealth and how wealth is created and natural ability, we're at a situation now at the moment, I believe at least, where natural ability is considered almost sinful, evil. You must be a white supremacist Nazi. And yet the equity, supposed equity at least, of everyone having a certification. Now, looking at, say, a job in some shit low paid job in a retail store that pays, it doesn't pay enough money. Even if you live in your folks' basement, you still would struggle to get by on the sort of money those shit jobs pay. And yet even then, even with those sort of jobs, they've got these what they call mini diplomas, which are supposed to teach people what to do in those sort of low-paid retail jobs, and they do it like the community college type level. And but these things still cost money. These are people who are already penniless and already low IQ, and their aspirations, 1 in 1,000 is going to get beyond that level. And maybe at the peak of their career, they're going to be on the refund desk or something like that at Walmart. But these people are being given what's called Retail 1 and Retail 2 and Retail 3. And some of these retail firms are demanding that you have this sort of certification. Now, if you have a certificate, you're deemed as qualified. Doesn't matter what you can do or can't do. That becomes the criteria to judge the worth of say someone's a job application and so on. Now, as long as you've got all your employees in the shop have got this, this fucking retail certificate thing from the local community college, then you as maybe the HR director or maybe even the store manager or something like that, you're deemed as having done your job. Well, no, it wouldn't be the store manager. They don't make any decisions. I think they only get the choice of hiring, very short-term casual people. Even then, so this is this certification thing has replaced the natural aptitude, natural ability. And I think for the worse. I think it's a terrible outcome, and I think it's part and parcel of what we see of the equity thing, where we need all sorts of minority people being shoehorned into jobs they're not even remotely qualified for. But the white people, the local, this is in the West I'm talking about, the white people that would have gone into those jobs, they're actually being effectively cast aside. Because any natural ability they may have is viewed now as effectively they're a Nazi if they have that, because it upsets the globalization narrative of equal outcomes with black and brown lesbians and the like. Now, this comes into the final point I'll make on this is the West, and particularly Australia is going through it at the moment because of an election coming up, but all across the Western world is this scream of, we have to bring in lots of illiterate black and brown peasants from third world shitholes because we've got a skills shortage. Skills. Now, what skills? No one seems to know. there's a civil engineering firm not far wants to pay fully qualified civil engineers with experience less than the average wage. So they say, well, there's just no one out there. We can't employ anybody. We're offering almost nothing as pay for the job, but it seems no one's applying. And if anyone comes in for an interview and asks what the money is, we tell them, they just get up and walk out. But that's not our fault. That's not our fault. It's a skills shortage. We just have to import more civil engineers from Bangladesh, and that'll solve the problem. So these sort of things are this idea of, again, the certification that someone got in a Bangladesh university. Some may say that's not really going to be much use in a first world country, but this idea of skill shortage, there is no skill shortage. And if there was a skill shortage, then it would be addressed by more training and so on. But until the scales fall from the eyes of some of these people, and what the globalists are pushing in particular is we need to start going back to a situation of natural aptitude and natural ability and looking out for it. Teachers and all these sorts of people now in the schools are looking out for who's transgender or who's lesbian. There are special units in the education department that are there to respond to teachers. And I think little Jane over there, I think she's a closet lesbian. Bang, there's a whole team of people that come and quietly, without her knowledge of Jane's parents, try and encourage her to, we'll support you, we'll look after you. Psst, just don't tell anybody. You can be a lesbian if you want, and introduce her to other lesbians and this sort of thing. So these sort of things go on, but there's no one looking out for natural talent or ability, or certainly nowhere near the scale that it used to be. So I think we need to get back to that if we're going to create or recreate a naturally wealthy society that can create new wealth and can create new opportunities for even the existing people, let alone the millions of peasants they want to stuff into the West, that will reduce all our standards of living as a consequence. So that's my view on that matter. You've been with Tassus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.